So what in the hell happened to the Kansas City Chiefs?
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily dose of everything you need to know about the National Football League. All the biggest stories covered with the local experts that know your favorite teams better than anyone else. Standing in for your usual host, Tony Wiggins, is Ross Jackson. That's me. I don't have a cool nickname like Wiggy, but I'll go with it and we'll figure it out. And joining me today is my good friend, Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers, Locked On Sports Today, our flagship show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. On today's episode, it's all Super Bowl all the time. We'll take a look at whether or not the results of Super Bowl 59 are more representative of the future of the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll dive into Jaylen Hurts entering elite quarterback status and that conversation, what that looks like for him moving forward. And we'll kick everything off with something rotten in the state of either Missouri or Kansas, whichever one you're in when it comes to Kansas City. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen and for being it every day. You're here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, you can head over to FanDuel.com to get started. $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Peter, the Chiefs were like completely outclassed by the Philadelphia Eagles on the biggest stage, or at least the NFL's biggest stage.
Yeah, it's funny, Ross, like you and I we were in New Orleans all week talking to people, and the thing that kept coming up over and over was, yeah, the Eagles might be more talented in literally every part of the field except quarterback and coach.
Right.
But that quarterback and coach just seems to overcome it all the time. And it struck me during the game. I think that they've had the inferior team by personnel, by talent in every Super Bowl they've been in. So the fact that they've won 3 is actually kind of a miracle in a lot of ways. But that's why this was so startling, because it's like you just expect, like when it was 10-0 or whatever it was early on in the game, I think at 7-0, I went over to our friends at FanDuel and I did the Eagles to win the first half, Chiefs to win the second half parlay. Because I was like, this is just what happens every time.
Yep.
And of course, it didn't. I don't know that this is indicative of anything long-term necessarily. I still think having Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is a pretty damn good recipe. And we'll get into that part of it with Jaylen Hurts. Mm-hmm. But is it really that surprising that the best team, the most talented team won? Like, no, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Yes. And of course, New Orleans being the host city has a reputation of big blowout Super Bowl victories. And this was just another one that was added. I want to jump over to our friend Chris Clark from over at Locked On Chiefs, who has a pretty specific kind of a specific thing that he identified that was the biggest issue for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Haven't had to do many of these this season. Chiefs drop the game. They lose 40-22 to the Philadelphia Eagles, a score that actually makes it look closer than the game really was. Kansas City allowed Mahomes to get sacked 6 different times. The problem is they allowed him to get sacked 6 times, and he wasn't blitzed once. This was one of the worst games that their offensive line has played, and one of the biggest stories that's going to be coming out of this, and something that they're going to have to get figured out in the offseason, is the offensive line. But it's also Andy Reid's decision not to make a change and not to go away from what had been working the past couple of weeks, when it was obvious that Joe Thuney and Mike Caliendo were not going to be the answer at left guard and left tackle in this game. He had the opportunity to make a change, chose not to, and this is what happens with that game. Kansas City will be back in the Super Bowl in the future. I can just about guarantee that. But for right now, there will be much more on Locked On Chiefs soon.
All right, so the future of the Kansas City Chiefs we'll get to in a little bit. Let's focus on the present of the Kansas City Chiefs. A 40-22 score, looking better than it actually looked, which is still an absolute blowout, by the way, by NFL standards. Mm-hmm. And so, Peter, how much do you put on the offensive line here, who 6 sacks, but also only 49 rushing yards in this game for the Kansas City Chiefs, didn't necessarily pave the way to success for this team?
In the 2 Super Bowls that Patrick Mahomes has lost, it has been the offensive line that has let him down in both of those games. And in the first one, it's injuries. So like, it's hard to blame the team building for that. But this was a problem all season, Ross. And it just didn't matter because they won all these close games. And I hate to, because it ends up being not sparkling analysis. It's not super entertaining. But I kept being like, at some point, this is going to come back to haunt them, right? That they keep winning all these close games, that they're not really as good as their record suggests. And like 8th by DVOA. So if you adjust for schedule, all that stuff. But it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. I just expected them to figure it out. I think if they hadn't run up against the single most talented team in the league, like they probably would have been fine, right? Like, and what it reminds me of is that they beat the Bills and Josh Allen and that team. And it's like, well, we know they're capable of overcoming these obstacles. It takes the number 1 defense in the league, the best front four that I don't know, since when? Since how long? I mean, the waves of bodies that they can throw at you is crazy. And so, like, it is the envy of the entire league to be able to do what they do, to not blitz. That was the stat when he said that to me last night on Locked On Sports Today. 6 sacks, and you didn't blitz one time.
Right.
Like they and this, like, go back to the Packers game in the wild card round. There were some suggestions. Oh, maybe they'll play more man coverage. The Packers struggle with. No, we're just going to sit in shell all game because we know we're going to get home with 4. And when you can do that, they can do that against anyone. Ross, that's the thing, is like, this is not unique to the Chiefs. Like the Packers have a really good offensive line, and they beat the crap out of that crew. So it's just like they're playing a different sport with these guys right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the place where Kansas City has been consistently weak on the offensive line was at tackle. And of course, where Philly is amongst its strongest is right off that edge. We saw Josh Sweat getting into the backfield. We saw the stand-up pass rush win, the speed pass rush win. It wasn't a situation where they were simulating a bunch of pressure or doing anything super fancy. They ran some games on the defensive line, but really the stunts or the twists were just to take advantage of the kind of ill communication and ill protection that was being provided by that Kansas City offensive line. So when we break down what is wrong with Kansas City, it feels like it's a lot of things that are both diagnosable and addressable. Do you agree with that? Or do you think that the Kansas City Chiefs are kind of in a place where like they might be kind of on the decline a little bit?
I think, and I posed this to Chris last night and he dismissed it. But when I watched this team all year, I went, there's a lot on Patrick Mahomes' shoulders. Because of what they have to do with some of the personnel deficiencies that they've had, some of the misses that they've had. Maybe Xavier Worthy is the next Tyreek Hill. But this felt like a game where it caught up to them that offensively they have not restocked the cover. They draft Kingsley Suamataia. He can't play. By like mid-season, it becomes obvious this guy cannot play for you. And Travis Kelce, all of a sudden, that odometer is like reaching its max. And like, is this the worst game? I'm throwing this at you off the rip, but is this the worst game an all-time great player has played in a big spot?
I would think so. And I would include Patrick Mahomes in that too. I didn't think Patrick Mahomes was particularly great.
I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes in the first half. He was horrible.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's exactly right. That like this wasn't just about the offensive line. This wasn't just about aging, but like this was Patrick Mahomes' worst game coming at the worst time. Now, one game is not representative as a greater portion of what you see over the course of an entire career. But boy, talk about bad timing, Peter. Talk about bad timing.
It was startling to me to see a guy that we've already, it's different when it's like, okay, we're waiting for that moment for Lamar Jackson for him to really elevate in the postseason. So if he had a bad game, and he's never had a game like in the first half like this, where you're just like, holy cow, like this guy doesn't know where he is. But to have that already cemented that this is one of the greatest to ever do it, to like just missed throws. It was the first drive, Ross. Mahomes rolls to his right on 3rd down and just sort of throws a prayer into double coverage. And I'm just sort of like, I don't know that I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes do that. And I was like, okay, he might just be cooked in this game. First thought was like, this is going to be Tampa all over again. I can't believe
that's exactly what I was thinking too. Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Like it was a really bad sign. He played the miss to DeAndre Hopkins, 3rd and 11, rolls to his right. DeAndre Hopkins is wide ass
all by himself,
open
all by himself.
And Tom Brady was like, well, Nuke's got to catch that. I'm like, okay, maybe, but like, come on.
That's seen a quarterback taken up for a quarterback.
We've seen Patrick Mahomes make that throw a million times. He was unfathomably bad. And the stats will say he was fine. This was horrible.
Yeah, completely agree. And look, from one horrible performance by a quarterback to a shockingly fantastic performance by a quarterback in Jaylen Hurts. Jaylen Hurts has officially entered elite quarterback status. We'll discuss as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs was to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Sounds like potentially the Philadelphia Eagles might be heading over to LinkedIn to try to find themselves another offensive coordinator. At least that's what the city of New Orleans is hoping for when it comes to Kellen Moore. But beyond that, if you're somebody looking to find somebody that's the right fit for your team culture, find somebody that's the right fit to lead your team, or of course, just looking for additional support in terms of what your team is doing on a daily basis, LinkedIn is the place for you. You know, you don't clock out at 5, but when you do clock out, LinkedIn clocks in, and they make sure that they bring you the highest possible quality hires. 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn brought them high quality hires. You can be in that number by heading over to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. It's official. Jaylen Hurts has entered elite quarterback status. Some will say that the MVP when it comes to the Super Bowl here in Super Bowl 59 was necessary, but it feels like he's going to have to work hard to keep it up. Peter, I want to jump to probably the happiest person in the world. Locked On Eagles host Louis DiBiase walking Broad Street in Philadelphia after the big win. Here's what he had to say, and then I want to chat with you about a little bit of Jaylen Hurts and that elite status.
I cannot believe it. The Philadelphia Eagles not only beat one of the greatest teams of all time in the Super Bowl, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but they did it by dropping 40 and blowing them out. Howie Roseman has built one of the greatest teams in NFL history, and they have a ring now to prove it. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, walking around Broad Street. And there's so many storylines to get into, but of course it's Jaylen Hurts we got to talk about. He finally got it done. The critics, there's nothing left to say. Less than 10 incompletions in this game, 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards passing, over 70 yards rushing, constant third down, big-time plays. The greatest Eagles quarterback of all time has got his ring, cemented his legacy, outplaying Pat Mahomes in 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. Is that not the most ultimate mic drop of all time? What a win. The Eagles are champions. Fly, Eagles, fly.
All right, there's a lot in that. All right. Louis very excited, and rightfully so. Dominating performance by the Philadelphia Eagles against a dynastic team, the Kansas City Chiefs. So a couple things here. MVP, was that enough to make Jaylen Hurts or put Jaylen Hurts in the conversation amongst the elite status in the elite class of quarterbacks? And one of the things that Louis said there was the haters, there's nothing left to say. Peter, is there truly nothing left to say?
Absolutely not. There's a lot left to say. But I think at this point, if you're Jaylen Hurts, you feel bulletproof in this moment.
Yeah,
because
100%.
Say whatever you want about whether I'm elite or not. The ring is the thing, right?
Yeah,
like I've got the ring. So you can say whatever you want. Say I'm not as good as Lamar Jackson. Say I'm not as good as Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, which by the way, he's not. Who cares at this point? Like today, right now.
Mm-hmm.
But is he an elite quarterback? No, he's not. He's just not. If like he played great in this game, and you are right. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes in 2 Super Bowls. Eli Manning outplayed Tom Brady in 2 Super Bowls. Is Eli Manning better than Tom Brady? No.
But is Eli Manning elite?
That class of elite quarterbacks? No.
Okay.
Like, so, and like I look at this, and there's a running joke on Packers Twitter. I hate to tie everything back to that, but that Jordan Love has outplayed Patrick Mahomes in 2 games against him. Does that make Jordan Love an elite quarterback? No. Okay. Right. So the part of this that I think is crucial is what Louis said is true. This is one of the all-time great teams. I saw Hayden Winks from Underdog Fantasy suggest that this is the greatest starting 22 in the salary cap era. So like your offensive starters plus your defensive starters. There's a case that that's true. I'm not going to say he's Andy Dalton because I think that would be uncharitable. Like I think that Jalen Hurts is in that tier of quarterbacks just below the top tier. Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow is probably in a tier by itself. And then there's this next group of like Herbert, Dak, Hurts, Love, Purdy. There's a handful of guys that are in, probably 8 guys that are in that next tier. You want to say he's at the top of that tier? I'm happy to stipulate that. But I need to see him be the engine. When Saquon Barkley is the MVP candidate on your team, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, you're an elite quarterback because you played well in one game, even if it's the most important game. Like Joe Flacco played all-time great quarterback for 3-4 games in a playoffs once. Now, there was a running joke for 10 years after that about Joe Flacco being elite, but that's why we have these conversations, right? Is because one great playoffs can elevate you narratively into those moments. I don't see that when I watch Jalen Hurts.
Okay, so just looking at Jalen Hurts' postseason career, thanks to our good friend Jordan Schultz, 6-3 record, Super Bowl champion and MVP, over 1,800 passing yards, 381 rushing yards, 20 total touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That feels like that's more than just one playoff series. I do want to say that. And here's my other thing on this point. I have a lot of trouble believing that Joe Burrow belongs in the first tier. I'm sorry, I do. I have a lot of trouble because if Jalen Hurts isn't in the first tier, then I don't understand why Joe Burrow is. For me, those two have effectively achieved, I would even say Jalen Hurts has achieved more.
Been at 2 Super Bowls instead of just the one and one run.
Right. Than what Joe Burrow has. Now, I understand that Super Bowls and wins, team stat, not quarterback stat. I'm with that 100%. But I have a little bit of trouble if Joe Burrow's in the top tier, separating why Joe Burrow belongs there, but Jalen Hurts doesn't.
Your point is taken on that because before the year, I was sort of like, are we sure Joe Burrow belongs? And I was right there with you. And then I just felt like he balled out all year with a defense that could not get a stop to save its life. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, like the only reason this team has any shot to win a football game is if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins go nuclear.
Yeah.
We've never seen Jalen Hurts really have to do that. Now, the Super Bowl 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever, 2022 year, they almost did it because that's a 35-38 game and all of those things. But it just, I feel like in the aggregate, we haven't seen Jalen Hurts have to carry that burden. Maybe that's an unfair threshold to have to carry. But I would like to see. That's why it's funny that Andy Dalton is the comparison because
I know, right?
because of the Bengals piece of this. But I do think like if you switch Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford, does the outcome of the season change? I don't think so.
Okay. Interesting. I could see that. I'm glad that you said Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford. I do wonder, though, if the Rams are better with Jalen Hurts than they are with Matthew Stafford because of the rising floor of a dual threat or mobile quarterback.
I mean, McVay would have a lot of fun with Jalen Hurts.
You see what I'm saying? And so, yeah, maybe Philly still ends up playing extremely well with Matthew Stafford, but I can't say that Jalen Hurts doesn't make the Rams better, which being paired with Sean McVay than Matthew Stafford makes the Rams. I'm not anti-Stafford, by the way. I'm very pro-Stafford. But I have a hard time believing that if you did switch the two, that the season results don't change because I think that Jalen Hurts makes the Rams better in that equation.
Better than Stafford? Stafford is the reason they can play the way that they do, though.
Yeah, the way that they do. I don't want that you could do something different.
Stafford rabbit hole of all this, but
yeah, no, we won't do that. We won't go that. We won't go that far. We don't need Matt Derry jumping in and all this other stuff and all that. You've already got enough grief in Detroit. Hi, Matt. But
but the most hated man in Detroit, according to Matt Derry.
Right, but I'm just saying, yeah, you're right. Like Matthew Stafford is the reason why they play the way that they do right now in Los Angeles. But what Sean McVay could do with a Jalen Hurts means that they could play something different. Yeah. And be very successful. So I don't know. I think Jalen Hurts belongs in the conversation. Well, but to argue against myself,
like belong in the conversation, I accept belongs in the conversation.
Okay,
but in the way where it's like so and so belongs in the MVP conversation. If we stipulate, no one thinks he should win. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about how close he is to those top guys while understanding that like he's not Lamar Jackson. He's just right. And Mahomes and Allen. I think if you wanted to make the case, I would be on board of saying Mahomes should be in his own tier.
Mm-hmm.
And then those two guys that I mentioned, the MVP finalists, are sort of in their own tier. And then you listed 12 quarterbacks. I think that I actually think that accurately reflects where the league is, because like CJ Stroud in a better situation probably looks better. If you swap, I think there are like 8 quarterbacks where if you swap them and put them in the Eagles situation, they look significantly better than they would on their team, which is why, and that's not a diss on Jalen Hurts, but that's why I said in the middle of the game, and I was teasing Louis about this, that I thought Howie Roseman should have been the Super Bowl MVP. Because it's just sort of like this was a team win. Like it's almost a bummer that it has to go to one guy, because I just felt like this was a total team win, and it doesn't work if everyone is not as good as they are. And that's a Howie Roseman thing.
Yeah. Howie Roseman built one of the greatest teams that I think we will see in a while. And I will say, to argue against myself, number 29 is the key number here. The Philadelphia Eagles were 29th in passing attempts in 2020. In 2020,
and when they came out of their bye week, they changed to become a more run-heavy team. Yep. And that was when their offense took off. I Philly fans hate when I bring it up, but like that happened in 2022 as well. They stopped trying to throw the ball over the yard. They started to run Jalen Hurts. They ran the ball more, and their offense took off. I don't think that's a coincidence, but you can't take the Jalen Hurts part out of it. His impact as a runner is huge. Yep.
He is a part of that rushing equation as well, which is what I think raises a bit of his floor. All right, so I don't know if we've solved the world's problems when it comes to Jalen Hurts. Maybe we did. But here's the thing. Next year can completely change this conversation. And I'm curious if Super Bowl 59 is more representative of the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles outlook in 2025. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is rolling right along. So as the ball is tipped, it's your opportunity to head over to FanDuel and get started today. Right now is a great opportunity for new users to get involved over at FanDuel. And I'm talking about today. Right now, you have later on today the Utah Jazz, unfortunately for them, traveling to take on the new look Los Angeles Lakers. The Jazz have been abysmal this season. The Lakers just got a lot better, getting rid of Anthony Davis, thank goodness, and bringing in Luka Doncic. And they are 13-point favorites going up against the Jazz. So as a new customer, you can head over to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. When you do, put $5 down for your first bet. If you win that first bet, you get $150 in bonus bet. So if you bet on the Lakers as a heavy favorite just on the money line, you could walk away with $150 in bonus bets by simply winning your first $5 bet. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. Bet with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL. Don't forget to tune in again tomorrow morning. Tyler Rowland bringing you the morning edition of Locked On NFL, continuing to break down everything going on with this incredible Super Bowl matchup. And may I say, incredible host city. I mean, incredible
you
host
may
city
say,
in New Orleans.
One of my favorite cities in the world, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Really incredible stuff all throughout the week. Peter and I here with you today. Tony will be back tomorrow. Peter and I, of course, were at Super Bowl Radio Row all week. And so it felt appropriate to get together to kind of finish up the work that we were doing all throughout the week and look at the Super Bowl 59, a 40-22 victory, demolition by the Philadelphia Eagles
right here.
Yeah, right. And Peter, if we ask Louis DiBiase again over on Locked On Eagles, if this game is more representative to the outlook of the Philadelphia Eagles going into next year, he believes that a dynasty might be getting started.
The window's wide open. They can do it again. Like, this team was supposed to be here, and they're supposed to be there next year, and the year after, and the year after. This is a much bigger window of potential sustained success than the 2017 Eagles had after that. And a lot of that's because, again, you have, I think, the most unfairly criticized, elite, historically paced head coach and quarterback combo in Jaylen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Those guys aren't going anywhere, and that's the most important part of a dynasty. But again, look at the roster. Look at the roster Howie Roseman built. You're going to lose some players. You're not going to keep both Milton and Sweat. Hopefully you keep Zach Bond, but you might not keep Mekhi Becton. but the vast majority of this roster is coming back next year.
Do you remember when Louis was like, Nick Sirianni needs to be fired?
Excuse me. That was like this year. That was like in the last 6 months. That
What
happened.
a crazy turn.
I was joking on social media that we had a college football title winner and an NFL title winner whose fan base wanted the head coach fired multiple times the year they won the title.
I love it.
I love it. And by the way, credit to Lou. He admitted on Locked On Sports today that he was someone who was not a believer in Jaylen Hurts. So when he is talking about the most unfairly maligned, there's a little bit of physician heal thyself in there, because he's talking about him. He was someone who was like, hey, he's got to prove it. He's got to prove it. And I think there were a lot of people, I'm people, who saw Jaylen Hurts.
Hello, it's me, people.
And went, you're going to have to back that up for me, dog, because I need to see it again in a situation where you're not being propped up by everything around you. Now, 2023 happened, 2024. Okay, Super Bowl title. What is there left to say? I'm glad he mentioned some of those names, though, because you're probably not going to keep Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. Well, that's one of your key advantages. Not both of them. That's one of your key advantages that you're losing. Brandon Graham probably headed to be, share a stage with you or I soon. Hopefully. And then you have Zach Bond, who's all pro, phenomenal interception in the Super Bowl, had an interception. I think he had a turnover in every playoff game.
Almost every playoff game. Yeah.
So like he's on a remarkable run after being picked up off the scrap heap,
off the street
in New Orleans. Yeah. They didn't think he could, like, New Orleans was just like, buy. The Eagles signed him for $3.5 million, which, I'd be happily sign a $3.5 million contract. But I can't play middle linebacker at an all pro level. Zach Bond can. It's going to get harder. Jaylen Hurts is going to get more expensive. Some of these guys that you're drafting and developing, you're going to have to pay.
Yep.
We have to be careful talking dynasty. I do think, though, it's worth pointing out, if you look at it, like 2017, they win, 2022, they don't win. And then, but go. And then 2024, they win. It's not the Chiefs run, because nothing is the Chiefs run.
Right.
But if they do it again, like if they go back to back, let's just say, then I think we have to bring in everything, right? We have to bring in 2017, at least in the Howie Roseman era, because it will be a capital D dynasty in a way that I don't know that we've ever seen. You get the fluky 2017, not touchdown, but title run. You almost do it in 2022. And then you win, let's just say they go back to back. Right. Then it all counts. It's 4 Super Bowls in 9 years or whatever it is. Like that's as good as anything we saw Tom Brady do. So I think that we forget Tom Brady had 10 years where he's wandering in the wilderness in New England. And so this it changes. Just like 2023 kind of colors our opinion of what happened in 2022. I think the fact that they flamed out, we going, see, that team's not as good as we thought. Right. Well, now do we have to reframe it again, Ross? Because it's like, well, maybe that defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator just kind of sucked. And their defensive personnel was not as good as they needed to be. And now you add 2 rookies who are going to be there, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
Oh my gosh.
This is the worst they're ever going to play.
Right. So, this is the worst you're going to see from them. Right.
This defense could be what like that Patriots defense where it's like, no, this is just the best defense in the league, like every year. Yeah. I Vic
think
Fangio's not getting another job. Like this is going to be Spags.
Oh no.
He's just going to be the defensive coordinator for the Eagles until he retires.
Yeah. Dunmore, Pennsylvania native, Philadelphia pro sports fan growing up. Like he's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere at all.
Thanks. I hate it.
I'll say this. I think that the Eagles, and you can call it recency bias if you want.
Recency bias.
Royal you, not you specifically, Peter. Give me a chance. You call it recency bias if you want, but I think that the Eagles have a better chance of getting back to the Super Bowl next year than the Kansas City Chiefs do. But here's the thing: that's not just about the one team, because there's 31 other teams in the in the league. There's 15 other teams in your conference. But if I have to play 15 other teams in my conference to get to a Super Bowl, I'd much rather be in the NFC than the AFC right now. Especially with the quarterback play in both those conferences, I'd much rather be in the NFC. So that's one of the reasons why I think that Philly has a better shot.
I think that's probably true. But can Justin Herbert do something in the playoffs challenge? Right? Like Lamar, right?
No, you're right.
A consensus top 10 quarterback, and he has done nothing but pee down his leg in the postseason. Lamar Jackson has, like, what is Lamar Jackson's signature playoff moment to date? Let's see. Okay. Joe Burrow has one run with the Bengals, and it's not even really Joe Burrow's run. Like, if you go back and look at the numbers, look at the situational stuff, like, it wasn't like he was fantastic in that postseason. So, like, and Josh Allen, we're still waiting. Josh.
Right.
Now it's not his fault that he plays in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes, but like, I hear you, and I my brain says yes, but then the more I think about it, I'm just sort of like, I don't know if anybody in there scares me. If I'm the Chiefs, I feel like I should just be able to moonwalk back to the Super Bowl again, just like the Eagles. Like, unfortunately, I feel like it is like the Lions. Who knows? What if Dan Campbell is just a savant at hiring coaches?
Right.
What if Matthew Stafford leaves the Rams and plays for the Vikings? What about that? Or what if Aaron Rodgers completes the full Favre and goes and plays for the Vikings? Like, who knows what could happen?
I'm not worried about that.
No, okay.
I'm not worried about that at all.
Who knows what could happen in the next 3 months? That's
Right.
the thing. And so, yeah, I think you're probably right. But also, if you're the Chiefs, like, I don't know, you feel like, I still feel like the most consistent way to get to a Super Bowl is having the best coach and the best quarterback. I still think they do. And so it's harder to have the best roster year in and year out. It's just harder.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, these two teams, here's what I will say. I think that this game was more representative of the Eagles' future success than it is representative of the Chiefs' future decline. I do think that there are things, you know what I mean? I do think that there are things that won't go as great for Kansas City if Travis Kelce calls it a career. Like, those are the things but that's not represented in this, nexus of a game here in New Orleans. And so the way that I look at it is that I think that this is more representative of the Eagles' success than it is of the Kansas City failure. So Super Bowl 60, do we see Philly and Kansas City again in Santa Clara? I don't know.
God,
It could be. I hope not. I hope we see something a little bit different, but I'm not. I
It does
won't be
feel that
picking
way, though,
against
right?
Philly
Like,
very
right now.
much.
It seems like that, like, whatever the odds are, and I know that they are the favorites to get back there according to our friends at FanDuel, but like, nothing else even seems that plausible to me, frankly. Right
I
now.
know.
Like,
I know.
it just seems like Philly especially seems to be further away from everyone in the NFC than Kansas City is in the AFC. But all that being said, like, if Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, and Zach Bond all happen to leave, like, I think that changes a lot for me. Like, and you're always one injury away. The Eagles were remarkably healthy this year. You never know what those injuries can do. Ask the Detroit Lions. They felt like they were the best team all year. And all of a sudden, like, if Aiden Hutchinson is healthy, do we have an all-time NFC Championship game with those two teams? Maybe we do. If Jalen Carter slips in the snow in the low red zone in the fourth quarter against the Rams, Nick Sirianni might be fired. And yet these are the sliding doors moments that define the NFL forever from time immemorial. And it's what is the Pat Riley line? Like, things can change on a trifle. It's just these small things all of a sudden, these big sliding door moments. And here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an offseason for a reason, and it is a game of attrition. So we'll see what happens over the course of this offseason. And of course, the great equalizer, health. We'll see what that looks like in 2025 as well. Peter, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. Tony will be back tomorrow. We'll also have Tyler ready for you in the morning. The madman, Tyler Rowland, as he gives you that double shot of Tyler Espresso to get you ready with your NFL news in the morning. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On NFL, for being everydayers, and for making us your first listen each and every day. Don't forget to go and check out your favorite local show as well. We got you covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.